Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
Hello. Welcome to the Xirtus.
SYNCTANK.
Was that dramatic enough? I hope that was good. I just wanted to make sure that people felt. All right, well, now we have directly from, I was going to say the CIA, but you're from Canada, so that doesn't work. So like British intelligence, or, you know, maybe like you're from like the well, I don't know. What would you say, Jake? What's the real scoop? Where do you come from? What part of the mothership are you from?
I'm from Earth, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
He's from his mom's,
Winnipeg,
actually.
right?
Your mom. Okay, there's a video though I gotta pull up just to refresh people's memories, like that came out that we were super flattered by, that was basically calling us all this like super intricate cabal, which was pretty cool. And like you're into synchronicity. That's kind of a big part of it, right? Here's like the video.
Yeah.
And this guy was like, okay, like Jake Coates, who always is brought up in the context of synchromysticism, as a person who coined the term, makes what seems like constant references to extremely frequent habit of engaging in ceremony or consuming ayahuasca. Bro, you sound like someone that everyone wants to hang out with. So I don't know. He's really jealous. We want to know more. That was basically this guy's whole conspiracy, was that like, I don't know. What do you got to say about it?
Well, I skimmed the video, so I don't feel like I exactly know what he's trying to say. I find it muddled. You know, it's not to me like clear thinking, so it's hard to follow. But yeah, I guess the general.
Yeah, there's not a lot of direct synchronicities. It's a lot of like feelings. He's like, well, that feels weird, right? And then this feels weird.
Yeah, I guess what he's trying to say is that synchromysticism is sort of a smokescreen or a funnel to there's this reality, but it's something nefarious and something conspiratorial, and then sync makes it something mystical and something you know, spiritual or whatever.
Right.
That I guess drugs have sort of fried my brain or whatever. I'm not sure, or I'm some part of some government plan thing.
I think that's it, because the ayahuasca is like only the elite can afford to go to Peru now. Like,
okay, yeah, I didn't.
I think my issue is just kind of like this mentality of that it's either or, like, because a lot of us, the way that we got into sync in the first place was through conspiracy theory. A lot of us, that was our jumping off point. and then we found places where it's like this kind of transcends this way of thinking. And so it doesn't necessarily negate that conspiracies go on. It just recognizes that it goes deeper and that there's another side to things. And so I personally kind of feel that conspiracy theory is kind of a shell that if you penetrate that shell, there's something else that kind of comes through, and you can kind of, that line between like the patterns that exist in nature we see in our own goings on, you could find the same thing that you find. My rabbi likes to say this to me about the work that I do. He's like, you could find the same thing in a leaf if you look deeply enough. But and the way I put it is, I'm like, well, media allows me to kind of not just have that insight, but to be able to share that insight in almost like it reminds me of like El Dorado, when you like leave El Dorado and like your gold that you found turns to dirt, and it's like, this is like the gold that you found, you can actually like bring it with you somehow. It's like to be able to get a snapshot of this place that you went to. It's like Dr. Seuss had these like what he called unorthodox taxidermy, which is like creatures from his stories, but they would be like, you mount it on your wall. So you're like, tell somebody, I went on this crazy psychedelic safari, and they're like, that doesn't sound believable. There was wang doodles and rotten vermicious canids. And then you can point at your wall and be like, well, look, I brought one back with me. And it's like, that's the idea, at least, but this actually feels like that. Like, I actually have a hornswoggler. He's right over there.
Well, I just like the point is, it's like not a very good explanation of who you are, Jake. And so maybe you kind of want to explain a bit about like, what is synchromysticism? Who are you? Give like a more accurate, authentic introduction.
Give the 2024 audience the intro to who is Jake Hodson.
Yeah, so I guess it's just, to me, like, I've always been fascinated with synchronicity, and synchromysticism would be my best attempt at describing what it is. And then I guess because of my interest in film and media, I realized you can use that to investigate and show synchronicity. And the deeper I went into that journey, because I guess where myself, I'm also, I start with, as a youth, conspiracy theory being very integral to, things that put me on this path, and the occult and mystical stuff. So, 9/11 also played a big role, and the synchronicities with 9/11 were so huge that I started making videos about those, because I just thought these were mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's where my work sort of started getting people's attention and growing, and my own wrestling with trying to figure out, is there some sort of agenda behind 9/11? Is there some sort of, and I'm trying to understand it as a ritual, and this whole process of it sort of moved me into my current understanding of synchronicity, which is a very spiritual one, and a very I feel like it's a natural phenomenon. And this sync video to me is like a way of showing that this thing is real and is organic and is just a part of reality. So I just find it fascinating that you can actually, in a way, prove, but the only problem with the prove part is that you kind of have to be on the same frequency to experience it the way that I intend. If not, then you start seeing it as part of a conspiracy or an agenda, or that, maybe there's some nefarious plot that I'm part of, kind of thing. But yes, synchromysticism is just my best attempt at trying to explain what synchronicity is. I just called it mysticism because I wanted to make it clear that that's sort of the angle from which I come and which sync points me towards.
Right.
For me, I think synchronicity is where you get when conspiracy theory ends. You keep going down that rabbit hole, and you start to realize that there are things that cannot possibly be orchestrated on a human level. So, and then you start to see synchronicity and read synchronicity. So I just feel like the guy in the video,
I love it.
Bless his heart, is
Yeah, I mean,
So
doing
like
that.
imagine what could be cooler. So this is the thing about it. So like you spend your life trying to make synchronicity aware, your awareness, it's your synchronicity awareness soapbox. That's right. You're just, hey, look, have you noticed that there's some synchronicity in the world? And eventually it gets to the point where this guy is making, he doesn't realize it, but he's trying to tie together synchronicities. And you're part of them at that point. Like, so it's built, it's like, that's the most beautiful
The circle of life.
It
Yeah.
really is, right?
And I think it's been around long enough now that it's, it seems almost in this day and age of the internet, it's almost mythic, something that's like 10, 15 years old is almost not part of the myth.
Right.
Like, that was just YouTube stuff. That was just YouTube videos. But there's it's like even in the early days of YouTube that I uploaded some of that early 9/11 Stargate stuff. So I guess even that stuff feels now like it's part of the myth,
Right. Even DuckTales, you could find profundity in DuckTales. And so, Jake, at different times, especially early on with my own approach to synchronicity and some of the people I'm surrounded by, when you look up the definition of synchromysticism, you'll get some slightly different definitions. Some of them will say these could be coming from, secret societies or whatever, but they include that they could be a natural phenomenon as well. Your definition is one of finding profundity in the mundane. And that's something that I've had difficulty with at times. But as time goes by, I think I get a sense more and more of what it is that you're pointing at and the way that you articulate that. It's kind of like with Wilhelm Reich, the way he would use mysticism politically, I didn't really have a sense of initially. And I used to have kind of an aversion to that because I'm like, well, you're treating it that it's like that mysticism is this extremely problematic thing. And then I saw that he was applying that to like, political fanaticism in the way that people would kind of like, they'll take a symbol and they'll project profundity into that symbol in their own way. And that's a certain direction of a certain type of mysticism, but mysticism itself is much deeper than that. I think that's kind of a limited representation of what mysticism really amounts to, because people's own religious experiences obviously is much different than when they're embracing a political ideology that has its sets of symbols that they're kind of hypnotized by. And so it depends on what, like, religion itself is one thing, organized religion where it decides to go is something else. Like religion to be reunited with, it speaks to spirituality, but we often find that materialism plays into religious organizations more than spirituality does a lot of the time, and it just becomes a vehicle for that under the guise, But yeah, my favorite videos of yours, I just want to say, is like, I like all of them, but I like the ones that I love your narration, but when you get to a place where it's just flowing, where the clips kind of speak to themselves, where and it allows you the room and the space to make the connections yourself. And so you're kind of like encouraging people to have insights on their own. Like, you're not putting everything in there for them. Like, watching your videos over the years, I always have these aha moments, some videos more than others where, and oftentimes when I think of an actor or an actress in particular, like depending on which one, like like say it's Patricia Arquette or something, I'm immediately at hairpiece. Like, I'm thinking of all of these different points, and I'm like, her totem as this hairspray bottle, and like I'm visualizing all of that. And so my associations, like for a lot of actors and actresses, come from you. Like it's synchronistically, I'm thinking of Jennifer Connelly walking to a pier at the end of, or in the midst of so many films, I'm like, why is she always walking to the pier? What does the pier mean? Does it mean the same thing for each? Like, is that all like, hero with 1,000 faces kind of thing?
I mean, even when you say pier, it's like seeing, and the eye on like Requiem for a Dream with the pier, I just feel like, I don't know, it's
the monolith, right? I mean,
Buena Vista
pyramid.
Yeah, the Disneyland California Adventure, the Buena Vista Pier now, which is pretty good.
Oh,
yeah, and you can see like the upside down thing. Here's your video from the 17 years ago.
Yeah, this is the first one. I wanted to bring this up. I wanted to say, well, because what I do, Jake, I don't know if you follow me on Twitter or whatever, CryptoK, is a lot of date work, how many days, how many weeks between days and stuff. And so one of the most fascinating things to me is looking at your video here, the 9/11 Pyramid Ritual, your first video, which you published on February 28th of 2007. And if you go and you check that against, of course, 9/11, it's 18 days into the 66th month. So that means it's 6 + 6 + 6 days into the 66th month after 9/11 that you published this video. So obviously you didn't do that on purpose.
So that'd be so base. So, all right,
the whole point of this is that
let's pretend he did though, because that would be like pretty. Jake, how did you come up?
Maybe
with that?
maybe he did. I actually, I should ask you. Did you do that on purpose?
No, I mean, not consciously. No, I don't remember any specific significance about the date I published that.
It was interestingly the last day of February. So
sure, Jake. No, I'm just kidding.
To me, reality, you know, it's kind of like it's all one thing. It's like one consciousness. And sync is just sort of the material aspect of reality, sort of unveiling the fact that everything is connected. So I feel like anything you do, if you look at it through the synchronicity lens, will have that aspect where you see connections between things, because that's actually reality. So it's kind of like you're flipping the tapestry of life. At the front of it, it looks like separate things, but then you flip it and all the little fibers are connected, all the threads are connected. So sync just makes that visible. But I think it's actually just because we use our minds and language and symbols to sort of understand experience, it looks like parts, it looks like separate parts, but it's actually this unified thing. It's like one thing, like the mystics talk about, but sync makes that visible. And then that's just what we're starting to wrestle with when we investigate synchronicity, is that reality is actually like synchronicity, and our day-to-day world, the way we experience it, actually it's kind of just like a gravity thing. Like gravity was just normally there, but it wasn't really interpreted as gravity until somebody went, things are falling down to the ground, there's this force. So it's the natural aspect of reality that we're starting to integrate into our everyday awareness, and that's synchronicity. And so if I published it on another day, there would be relationships with that day that would be cosmic and mystical and significant in some way, shape, or form. I believe, at least. And it's to me like, also 9/11 to me, I kind of like shy away sometimes from going that deeply into it anymore, because I feel like people fixate on that as like meaningful. That's why I find the synchronicity videos that I kind of really like nowadays, you know, can sometimes be about goofy things like, you know, Patricia Arquette and hair. You know, that's that's to me beautiful, that you can make something significant that shows this higher reality, but it's not about 9/11. It's about Patricia Arquette's hair.
Jake, there's so many of these. There's so many examples of these. So I've watched your videos over the years, and I was watching Severance, a show called Severance, and it has Patricia Arquette, and immediately, like, what kind of car does she drive? She drives a white Rabbit. Like, she drives a white Volkswagen Rabbit. And I'm just like, and there's been several other hair references with her since the time of you making that video. And I almost like wanted to like take your video and just like throw those clips in, just like edit them into it, you know, because it's just like it keeps going. So like you'll catch a connection with you, and then it's like, dude, from beyond the point where you made that video. Same thing with Charlize Theron. You had that Charlize Theron, the Mega Theron video, and then you had the one with like that she drinks and like everything she does, and it's like since the time of you making that video, it's just continued. Like she I'll keep catching it, and I'm like, oh my god, it's still happening.
I'll see them too, and then I'll kind of like, you know, sometimes I'm tempted to like make another one, but it would almost just be like the same video with a few additions. So, you know, but I like that because it makes people then who watch the videos, you can see the syncs too, you know, like you're describing.
Well, she even saw that sync, and she watched that on a Radio 8 Ball, right? So they showed it to her before she spun the wheel with Andreas. And so,
Patricia,
Patricia,
yeah, she liked, I don't think she retweeted the video, but once on Twitter, she liked a tweet about hairpiece. Like I published, I think it was like a year later or on her birthday, 1 year.
I
So
thought
she's
that there was an
aware of it.
episode of Radio 8 Ball that she was the guest and she
That's
like
right.
Skyped in or whatever, but I think she watched the video before she you
Yeah,
know, played the game. Yeah.
that was the idea. Andres Jones showed those videos, the ones that were made for Radio 8 Ball, to the celebrity, and then they could comment on it during the show.
Yeah.
So I think there was Seth Green.
Yeah.
There was
Andy Decker.
John C.
No,
Riley.
he didn't have a show, one, but yeah.
And
John C. Riley did Radio 8 Ball? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was what the Jesus was about.
The Jesus is so good.
Yeah.
I remember we're like, you came out with that way back when you came out with that. I think it was 2010. I remember showing that to a group of people and their heads just exploded. They were like, this is the greatest thing ever. That's such a good classic video. But, yeah. Channel 42.
Time God is my favorite of your videos, Jake.
I recently rewatched Time God. I really like that one. It's just so long, so it really has time to like breathe and get you in. And I feel like the ones that are really long, I kind of like the most because I feel like they take you and they, you know, you get really, it becomes to me like overwhelmingly true. And then also for me, like if I watch one like Time God, it's like, it's not, I feel like I didn't make that video. I feel like reality made that video, because when the synchronicities that I'll see in it are sometimes not necessarily ones that I thought of when I was making it. Yeah. Or the message in there will be something that, you know, is relevant to me now, kind of thing. So I feel like that one's organically alive. I mean, a lot of them are, but that just when they're long, they have so much room to sprawl and for you to like have your own relationship to it.
That one I remember when it came out because it was very shortly after, or it was actually on October 21st, 2015 that you published it, maybe. The same day as the Back to the Future Predicts 9/11 video that went viral, and which is the subject in that conspiracy video. And so this was just an example of how how the times create the times drag this stuff out of people, out of us, rather than like us create. None of you guys doing this created this stuff. This stuff is creating us, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah.
That's sort of where we do it.
It's sort of like the cliche of like, it's in the marble, you know, the artist, if it was Da Vinci or Michelangelo, or whatever, you know, it's like he says the figure is in the marble and he's just taking away the excess and then it appears. And it feels like that when you're making a sync video. It's like, this thing exists. Yeah. It's like there's this non-local object woven through space and time. You just kind of have to put the parts together here in the now, but then it shows you this higher dimensional object that always was there. And I feel like that's the confusing part for people who are trying to see this. If you're trying to understand from a materialistic point of view, then yes, you have to explain it with an orchestrated conspiracy where the individual directors and actors and everybody are in on this kind of thing. But this loopy thing that one's trying to describe of a non-local mind that's actually orchestrating this, you know, creation that's non-local, you know, that to me is what a sync video is. It's like a thing that's higher dimensional, and you can put it into a material reality and you can watch it and you can like.
So what do you see it as like?
Sorry, it's like an Escher drawing, but with video. It's like a moving Escher picture.
But the sync thing, right? So like, is it Clockwork Elves? Is it Angels and Demons? Is it God? You're saying it's like the universe creation itself. Like, what do you think? What do you think of as God? Is it like a reflective thing that we're becoming? Like, is it the thing that created us all? Is it like we're all made of it? What is this thing that's creating the sync?
Yeah, I guess I think it's like one, you don't know.
Yeah, fair.
You don't know. But I think it's the awareness itself that, you know, we all are is God.
Right.
And that
I'm a fan of awareness.
Yeah, awareness.
there's this point. So you're familiar with Scott Onstott's work, Jake. You know, the Secrets in Plain Sight and all of that. He's in our community. He's been a presenter at certain sync summits and stuff. But he looks at sacred
Similarly,
sites. So he'll get to a point where he's looking at like these are obviously like there'd be different buildings, and he's looking at the measurements and the symbolism that plays into the measurements for like Freemasons and an ancient architecture, the pyramids, all these kind of things. And then he'll do these measurements, and he'll be like, you can see like this is surely intentional. But then he reaches this point where he goes, this goes beyond what is even conceivably possible as far as we generally relate to intent, and it'll take off. And in my mind, what I see is the the Sistine Chapel, or like the poster for E.T., where it's like the alien hand touching the boy's hand, and it's like that point where they meet is what fascinates me. That's what I'm fixated on, is that where is that line, and is it just in the sand? Because like my sister's husband's sister, she was the first person to tell me when I was a teenager. She said she was in these really weird small roles in films. She was one of the mermaids in Hook, and she was asked to be one of the three vampiresses in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and she didn't. But there was she would find these places where the casting agencies really wanted her to do certain roles, and she really believed, and she told me this, that she felt that she was being archetype casted. And that basically they wanted her in this role for symbolic reasons, because there's three mermaids in this movie, then there's three vampires. They wanted to connect the sirens and the vampires or whatever. And it was the first time I'd ever heard of archetype casting. And a lot of what we're talking about, the work that you've done looking at Jim Carrey, or any of these, who's the one that you got in K2 and
Robin Tunney?
Yes, thank you. It's like you'll focus on an actor and an actress like that, and you'll find that there's these reoccurring threads. Well, she expressed to me that she felt that was happening intentionally, and that she described a religion of sorts that's kind of like modern mythology, that Hollywood kind of relates to things through this tapestry. But the thing is that when you're doing something like that, just with what Scott Onstott shows with the architecture, is there is a line where it's there's a degree of intent. And then beyond this, the thing kind of takes off. A lot of the work that I see you doing feels like you can find that line where it's something's kind of been set up to some degree, and then it's kind of you can see nature itself coming through the cracks of it, if that makes sense. There's life growing through the cracks. In this video that this guy shared with us, he goes into RFK and stuff, because RFK is talking about synchronicity. So he's there's some other plot going on. I'm no, the plot, if it is a plot, the way RFK describes it is he's you have chaos, what we perceive as chaos, and you have the hand of God coming through, and that there's a profundity in the midst of what the way that you described it with your definition, where you're you have profundity in the mundane. And I'm dude, that if it's a conspiracy, it's much larger than anything we generally relate to as conspiracy. It's a higher conspiracy.
It's hormonal conspiracy. Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna, I guess, to me it's I don't have a problem with concepts like the Illuminati or something like that, but what that then is to me is just what is the same thing we talk about as God. Because if there's a hand that's orchestrating and manipulating and controlling, then that is God, but then it becomes very much like the Freemasons would, the creator in the eye in the triangle, and that's to me not a nefarious thing, because I feel that's nature.
Right, but isn't there the argument that what we compartmentalize and what we basically project with our minds, that it mimics that higher order? We kind of approximate that, and that's kind of what mathematics is for us, because the description's not the described. So when we're relating to a projection, isn't that kind of a sheath or a representational model of that thing that's being pointed to? It seems all of our systems are kind of these dualistic imitations of this polarity that exists in nature. So that being said, couldn't one argue that if it's nefarious, it's only nefarious as far as what ego is in the first place, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It's a stand-in for your higher self,
And I mean, I guess the ego, I guess would it's kind of we want to see a bad guy. We want to see that orchestrating principle sometimes as a bad guy as well, because it's a danger to the individual self to be aware of God in the way that we're describing it, because it negates the sort of sense of an individual self that's limited, and it's threatening to your ego, the reality.
Right.
So I feel like we vilify aspects of our God self to keep us from integrating a reality that is more mystical and includes because I mean, you're involved in it. Like when synchronicity and these things are happening, they're happening to you, and your awareness is part of what is creating these synchronicities. So then that line between what is God and what are you, that drives a lot of people nuts, because it's kind of like, well, if I'm God, then what is that for? And I'm like, who am I? But I feel like the trick is that it is about your identity. It's like, who am I?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been the mystery that people have been dealing with forever,
Yeah.
I feel like there's so many rooms for going kind of crazy on this journey, and I've seen that happen. People who try and understand sync, or who try and understand synchromysticism, it often attracts people who are sort of unstable, and it often makes people even more unstable. And I kind of regret that to an extent, but I also feel like it's a bit of a initiation process for some people who are ready to, open up their third eyes in a way. But I mean, that's just, to me, a more like kind of a hokey, mystical way of saying becoming, who and what we really are, which is
right.
And it's just I feel like we're sort of at the fringe of like an evolutionary process. We're just a little bit ahead of the curve when you're dealing with this synchronicity thing. I think it's going to be like a normal aspect of reality at some point, that people will just be like, oh yeah, that aspect of existence,
Sync is kind of a support group for conspiracy theorists, I think, because it's like at the end of the rainbow, it's like, but all the bad guys are doing bad stuff, and it's like, but then there's more, there's something else going on behind that, and so yeah, it's fun. I was going to say that one of the criticisms people have about sync, and even back in the day, is that is the idea of it like sort of minimizing suffering, or like being sort of like a little bit too fairy, kind of off in the clouds of like.
I love how it's usually it's a freaking Calvinist who will say it too. It's like someone's like, I think that synchronicity magic is like a cult, and that God wanted the Holocaust to happen for some reason because the Calvinism, right? Determinism. So I don't know. I find that like always the case, that synchromysticism isn't saying that it has to happen, but it also is that things are connected. And this is something that people are more and more, like you said, every day. Like AI is, I was like 20 years ago, what is cat was the big Google question. I would like look at all the pictures of cats and figure out what part of the picture was a cat and what part of the picture wasn't a cat. Is you ain't a cat, right? But eventually it starts to get these really weird things where it's like, wait, kind of in a weird way, like this whole landmass looks like a cat. And so all of a sudden AI starts picking up on synchromysticism. And to an extent, you'd be like, well, does that affect anything? Like maybe, for instance, the faces of crabs in Japan. There are these face crabs that look like horrified, like, oh, like human faces, which seems to evolutionarily keep them from being eaten. So these kinds of synchronicities that we wouldn't necessarily notice on our own, but like we can pick up on the more data points we put together. And then, none of these are intentional as far as we can tell. Like, it's not like, I mean, it's possible someone like genetically engineered crabs thousands of generations ago, but it's more likely that it's just like the Occam's razor narrative story, like this is happening, and now we have all these examples of things which tie together in all the ways you want them to. Like, it's like taking a folder and sorting it different ways, right? And like just there's so many weird ways you haven't thought about things can be sorted.
Yeah, totally.
Oh yeah, there was a question. That was right. That was right. Dave had. Have you experienced a sync between doppelgangers in real life, e.g., strange coincidences between unrelated lookalikes? Any thoughts?
There's Dostoevsky's story about that. What is that called? I forget what that story is called, but he had a bit about doppelgangers. I'm kind of tripped out on it. The double.
I have named doppelgangers a lot. Where like if somebody like with one name goes out of my life, someone with that same name shows up. It's like often.
Right. So it's like it's a different but the same, you know, that phenomenon. I mean, I find that just with album film pairing stuff that I do, it's kind of like trying to seek out doppelgangers. I'm like, wait a minute, you know, these are the same picture, you know, they're different but the same, you know. So yeah, I come up against that a lot. But as far as like people in real life, like lookalikes, like one time I met a woman while I was at a Greyhound station that was born within an hour of me, and she was actually from Canada. And she'd never been to the United States before. And she came up to me and she asked me, hey, do you know how to get to Mount Madonna? While I was in Oakland. And I lived at this community in Mount Madonna and I'd studied under Baba Hari Das. And I was like, yeah, I used to live there. And I took her to it. But she was like, yeah, it came out within maybe the first 10 minutes of us meeting each other that she was born within an hour of me, because we figured out the time difference even of like what it was in Canada. And it's like same day and year. So it's like, that was like, she didn't look like me, but there's definitely like, wow, that's a weird synchronicity. Even that we got to that, you know? Yeah, very strange, but
but yeah, doing certain things will lead to certain outcomes. Also, you know, like it might be that if you're the kind of person that's going to end up in Mount Madonna, you might have come through certain choices that you've made or environmental conditions that would have, you know, affected you, react to.
Well, this is the thing, and I think you touched on it, Jake, where you're talking about like how the observer is one with the observed. And so, like, you know, you say two things at once: the description's not the described, and the observer is the observed. You influence that which you're perceiving. And so, even for me, like, I can show you that if you take Ex Machina and Under the Skin, that if you start them on the same frame, they'll cut to black for credits on the same frame. Like, I didn't, and there's the syntax aspect. Like, I didn't try those with anything else. I just saw the resonance, and that's what happened. But the thing is like, I can document that, I can share that, but it's also, I'm an observer observing something. How much of me is in that, if at all? Like, I really relate to what you're saying about how you can revisit your old sync films and see them in new ways because they're video collages. Like, you took the art of all these other artists and put them into one thing. It's easier to be removed. Like, when I used to paint and draw, I used to have an entirely different relationship to my art as when I'm taking components of other people's pieces and putting them together myself. Like, my identity isn't really in that. Like, I just feel like this medium in between. Like, I'm just like organizing what other people have done. So it's easy to remove myself from it. And that feels very good as an artist, to not have to have that attachment of, this is me, you know, this is like, this actually, I don't even like, this isn't even anything to do with me on one level. And yet on another level, it has everything to do with me because I'm the one who is observing it, you know? So
I feel like that's the best work, really. It's when you are, you're integral, but you're also out of the way. And then it's kind of like the sync work that I feel like is the best is the one where you're so guided by what you're doing that it's like, it's such an organic process. When I start putting things together, I have a certain idea about, you know, what actors and what themes, but very much the process of putting the scenes next to each other will influence what comes next. And then it becomes very much like a self-guided process where a lot of intuition, but then also it's like your mind just kind of like moves out of it and it just becomes what it wants to. And the thing that it becomes is better than you even intended. And when I watch those again, I'm like, whoa, I don't even know what this is. You know,
do you feel like, communicated with? Like, do you feel in like median work, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like do you think something communicates through synchronicity?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a story. Like, all of these things that I'm trying to use to describe and understand is kind of a story. But many times I've had the feeling that this is like a higher intelligence thing. You could say it's like aliens. This is the real contact. When you're watching a sync video, you're having like contact with higher intelligences. And it feels that way. And it's kind of like they're whispering their secrets. It's like, and you can call whatever you want, angels or aliens or archetypal self facets. But
You don't feel like demon though, right? You don't. What's the thing? Like, are these good? These are good.
Yeah. No, I feel like demons to me are things of lower vibration. When you're dealing with sync and with things that are uplifting, it's like you need an open heart. You need joy to make good sync. Things that are going to make people happy, things that are going to make people excited, are going to be of that quality. They're going to be about
creativity.
angelic.
It makes you
creativity. Yes.
With imagination. Yeah.
I
think you might mean I think you might mean higher frequency, because higher vibration would actually mean grosser or denser, because the less the lower the vibration, the more etheric it actually is.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's funny because the way people use that, they're like higher vibration. I'm like, I think you mean frequency.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's interesting that this idea that there's something communicating, right? Because like that's another question. Like when people talk about like clockwork elves and something on the other side, like it's interesting because it does feel helpful, because the more you can see how things are the same, history repeats itself, but it rhymes, all those kinds of things seem to be really useful, because you can see something coming. You're like, oh, this is kind of like that time that this happened, right? Like that's all very useful in making better choices. So all that seems like a valuable thing if you're talking about from like self-direction and self-navigation.
I think they have, well, okay, so what I think the guy's point, one of his points seems to be, is that sync has been weaponized to, in a way, and it absolutely has. In the
only for people who don't understand it.
Well, of course, yeah, and that's the whole point. So, but yeah,
then it hasn't been. It's only being weaponized, like in like the literal sense of like always being like since the sigils of Medea, right? This idea that a witch was making shields with magic symbols on them for kings, right? This idea that Jung's heraldry has sigil magic in it. The idea that our logos from the corporations after Bernays period, do they not count? When are we gonna admit that like synchromysticism is both been acknowledged and thought about and written about by East and West, for a long time? I don't know. It seems like this is an open sourcing of it with neurolinguistic programming. If people are aware of the symbols, when I see the AOL and it goes owl and there's a freaking eye in a pyramid's eye, like I see that. Like I don't know. I feel like everyone could look at it that way. And that's the opposite of what this guy is saying, right? Because he's saying basically that the ignorant plebeian is not having access to this. This is a YouTube video 17 years ago. So where's the lack of access? Like, what is? How much do you have to charge for it to be? I don't understand.
Right. Well, it's easy to see it as a conspiracy because Joe was so influenced by you, Jake. Like you can hear it when he does, and he'll tell you himself, but when he gets into the monolith part of that, listen to his voice. He's imitating you, like, and he knows it because he's such a fan. You've influenced him as far as his relationship to sync more than anybody else. And so, and I think the person in that video was like arguing something about the date in which his video was released of Back to the Future Predicts 9/11. And he was saying something, maybe it was about Trump or something. And it's like, no, dude, he was in a hurry to get that video done as soon as possible because he wanted it to come out before the date that's in Back to the Future 2 happened. And so that was what he was working with. But the person was reading into it and this whole other thing, like there's this other objective. And even like, I don't know how much communication you've had with Joe, but like, he's such a big fan of your work and he was so influenced by it, but you two have never even really met as far as I know. Like, so it's so funny because like, he's just like, he assumes that you're in cahoots with somebody that you've never actually had a real, correct me if I'm wrong, but even an exchange with. So like, that's hilarious.
But it would be based, again, like we need like a bat mansion with like all sorts of sync heads and like a big table. And like, I really want all that. Like, that's the thing. None of what he said sounded that bad to me. Like, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Like,
yeah, well, it's that phenomenon of like, and he's pointing out that like Andreas is in Santa Cruz, I'm in Santa Cruz. Yeah, Andreas and I, that's why
I keep promising to come hang out. I swear I'm gonna come hang out. I swear.
Oh,
over to his house
when things align, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Has it been a full year? Probably has. Yeah. So, but you know what?
You're forgetting. You guys are forgetting the other smoking gun, which is that I keep saying we because I didn't do it, but you were all on red ice.
Right.
Sure.
I wasn't. I was at a rave in San Francisco. I was invited to go on red ice, and I didn't go. And then right after that show happened, there was
what
like
people don't
that
understand is that red ice was really cool back then.
Yeah, and actually, it was within a couple of weeks of SyncBook going on red ice that they released that documentary, that Hitler apologist documentary from the guy, and like it used to be that they just gave a platform to all kinds of people, and that was that, and that's how we related to red ice, was just
And
like,
maybe that was the whole point. Maybe that whole point was to like draw these people in and then make that shift, and then you can shitcode everybody who was there.
I don't know. It was a weird time. I had luckily I had nothing to do with the red ice. I had never like interacted with them or anything like that. But it was a really interesting time because people were freaking out about politics for the first time in the sync community. There were people saying, "Hey, wait, there's people that are into like open occult, and then there are this other group of people that are." I saw people that are like afraid, essentially, that it was going to be politicized by psychological operations. I mean, Christopher Knowles was indexing the Secret Sun group because he was afraid when Trump became elected that it was going to be like Secret Sun.
Oh yeah,
group was going to be weaponized by QAnon or even something else before, because it was before that, right? But there were a lot of reasons why, and then that entire period, you've got Pepe and imagery and memes and things like that, and most people not understanding it. So the fact that there's like levels of synchronicity that you're building, rather than like finding, like, because the guy who made that's a good example, like the frog, the guy didn't have anything to do with what it became. He created this thing that he was really against where it went and what it became. But that it just, things become what they need to be. And there's all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, there's always been a frog. Ancient Egypt, there was a frog, right?
Right, but isn't that the Illuminati? If that's not the Illuminati at this point, I don't quite know what is, because my relationship to people, like, I think I get what you're referring to, Jake, when you use the term, and you could go into Weishaupt or whatever, the whole history of that in Germany. But I think that phenomenon, when things get infiltrated that have a certain integrity, and of course, organizations or anything that has the most integrity are the most vulnerable to infiltration. So it's like, even for us, like we had Kyle Hunt. Like Kyle Hunt participated with the original SyncBook that you're in, I believe. And he had like afterwards, he had like a white supremacist type march thing that he was like leading. And like you look at his chapter and it's like the rainbow language, like nothing could be less nefarious. And it's just like, what happened to this guy? And it's like, we don't just.
Well, that's an interesting point to Jake's thing too, because like your version of the like Illuminati is like Tolstovian, right? Like this idea that there's this hidden hand and you become the hidden hand, like if you get rid of the thing that you're so worried about and wondering what it's like in those parties, then eventually you end up in this, this, you become the thing, and then you're doing the thing because you don't know any better. You haven't come up with any solutions. You've just been focusing on what they were doing and what you hated about it. Like they emulate it too, and it's almost worse,
Yeah, when you stare into the abyss and then the abyss stares back at you or whatever. But that, I guess I think that there's something to that phenomenon of things being co-opted. And it can have no relationship oftentimes to whatever its roots were, and it's a strange thing to try and come to terms with, because we have our associations with what is what, and then time goes by and people relate to things in different ways. I think maybe that was a concern about sync, but I think sync is always free. I don't think you can run out of sync. I think it's like it's not a limited resource. Like, I don't think that there's any end to it, and that's kind of the beauty of it. It's just, it gets deeper and deeper the more you go into it. The more there is to see, the further you go. So,
Yeah.
What do you think in terms of synchronicity? Like, what do you think is you talked earlier about neurodivergent people being attracted to sync, but what do you think? Is it a good thing for mainstream people? I like the idea of mainstream people being aware of what the symbolism is being used on them by advertisement companies. I think they should be aware. Do you agree, or do you think that, it's dangerous to know this stuff?
No, and I mean, I also think that we're one consciousness. So this growth, from 17 years ago, and and synchromysticism is just part of a bigger thing as well. So, but I mean, but we're growing as humanity's consciousness. So I feel like as that happens, these things become integrated and they become safe and they become normal, and it's not something that I feel like is nefarious or will blow people's minds and make people crazy. I feel like it can, and that's kind of been my goal, is to, with, because I feel like the early raw 9/11 synchronicity stuff, that's the stuff that drives people nuts when they watch that stuff. But I feel like if you watch like later versions of sync, where I feel like I became more whole, I became more centered and less confused about what I was doing, that's a sync that I find is more pure. And I feel like that's the stuff that David Charles Plate is resonating with, is talking about as things that has moved him more. And I feel like that's more of what I I feel like the things that I'm really known for, and that is associated to synchromysticism, is the 9/11 Stargate and that kind of thing. And you know, if you look at the view counts of those videos, we're talking about 200,000 views or something crazy, something like that, like for some of those 9/11 Stargate videos. And obviously, I think the majority of people who are watching that are seeing this as like an Illuminati conspiracy thing.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't like transitioned and moved on to see how that grew into something that's very organic and about, to me, peace and love and a higher transcendence kind of thing. But I feel like it's like that stuff nearly made me crazy, but I feel like through kind of love and humility and you know, a higher understanding of the spiritual aspect of it, it made it into a healthy thing. And I'd like to believe that as we move forward, people will come into this space and plug into the more healthy aspects of it, and not and transition into the higher understanding in a way that's gentle and not like, you know, so confusing and with all these rabbit holes of you know, things that make people you know, struggle with their identity and you know, conspiracies and all that kind of thing. So
right. Isn't there something to be said, Jake, about transmutation and kind of the paradox of a lot of the things that we see as as adversarial inside of ourselves, how those things in and of themselves can be transmuted? Like, I like the alchemical perspective of that. A lot of what we have a resistance to has a wealth in the midst of it that we can't perceive from one side until we leap into it. Kind of, it's hard to explain that, but it's kind of like the nature of the pain body, because a lot of people will experience cognitive dissonance if they're not used to having that kind of insight that comes with registering a synchronicity. Because registering a synchronicity, in my experience, is not so much like about thinking about something and then adding a new bit of knowledge. Like, we experience that in all kinds of ways throughout our lives, but that insight is almost like a space. It's like you provide the space and something comes through, and oh, is he still here? You lose him? Oh yeah, here you are. And then you know, we go aha, but it's a different kind of aha, because it's like a perceptual aha. It's not like, oh, I got this new piece of information and now I can, you know, I can hold it in my hands. Like, it's the thing that you're tapping into is so free. It's like the nature of the intelligence seems to transcend what we generally relate to as intelligence, as accumulated knowledge, you know. So I think there's something transformational that happens when you follow through the line like that. Just your ability to perceive it ends up transforming you in a certain way, because the perspective kind of like comes from somewhere else. It's not like, you know, like you've got all these pieces of information and now you can disseminate. It's more like, I've backed up, I've allowed for space, and now I can see something's been shown to me. It's the difference between inventing something and discovering something.
yeah.
So like the way you're saying with your videos, you feel like it's like, I mean, you didn't use that word, but it's like you're coming from a place of discovery, because it's almost like the thing is almost making itself, and you're just like, what do you have to show me? You know, so you're kind of moving yourself out of the way so that something else can come through. It's very different than like what a lot of, you know, subjects that people get into are like. It's like philosophy though, right? And I mean, we're talking about the clouds, like the heads being in the clouds, and that's kind of the accusation that we're getting, but that's always been the accusation against philosophers. Like, wasn't there that satire called Clouds on Plato? Isn't, do you guys know, what was that called? There's like a satiric play that's like kind of yeah, it's from Greece, where they were making fun of him, and it was like a spoof on everything that they were about, what they're talking about. And so, you know, I don't think that that's a new ad hominem or a new pejorative to kind of like put, you know, to say, oh, your head's in the clouds, you know.
Yeah.
Is there any videos you think that you want to make sure that people who've never heard of you before, or like, you know, the new generation of kids that are kind of getting into secret mysticism, like anything that you kind of recommend that they would start with, or like you would want them to see?
Yeah, I like Time God and Syncmus and Monolith.
Yeah.
Monolith is sort of a combination of a few sync videos put together in this 2-hour like epic one that my friend Jim Saunders cut together. He was a collaborator on many of the sync videos that I've made. Yeah, I think those are good ones to watch. Moonkey, I think Moonkey's a good one.
But Moonkey is some version of that. Maybe it's edited towards the end a little differently. Is in Monolith, right?
That's right. Yeah. Sync. It's basically like 3 sync videos together is Monolith. But yeah, I mean, I would think for me, it's like anything sort of from personally, I feel like there's value in the old stuff, but I would always like, you know, I would just, any of the videos where I narrated is to me sort of like a different generation of my sync videos. The first one I made was the Jennifer Connelly glass shatter one. I hadn't made a video for like 2 years, and I didn't want to like do narration. The reason just being that I didn't have a good audio setup. I'd made my old sync videos of just like very basic audio equipment, and when I collaborated with Jim and we made a few sync videos with better audio quality, I just felt kind of self-conscious about making sync videos with bad audio. So I was like, well, I have this one Jennifer Connelly sync in mind that requires no talking because it's just this shattered glass thing. So then I made that video, and when I didn't talk, I was like, this is better in a way. And I just sort of continued making videos forever without talking. That's funny enough. I consider sometimes making another narrated sync video. I have some audio equipment that I, you know, would feel confident about making a sync video with, but I never like like that would be a different thing. It would be more like a little mini doc. I wouldn't call that like a sync video, you know, but it's possible that I would do that. I'm thinking about making a sync video right now because I've been watching Dark Matter with Jennifer Connelly, and it just it's so kind of like cool how it connects with other things, because there's an episode that was recently that was called Jupiter, and they go to the cloud sculpture in Chicago, the same one that Jake Gyllenhaal goes to in Source Code, and you know, she's in Labyrinth, and you know, Labyrinth was directed by David Bowie's son, and he made Source Code. So there's just this kind of like neat sync video that I've been thinking about, because I don't get a ton of time to like watch movies nowadays. I'm more like a dad right now for the last 2 years. You know, I'm like full-time dad. I'm at home with my kid, and at night I just watch 1 or 2 shows with my wife, and then I go to bed. I'm not watching movies all day. I don't have time to make elaborate mind fucks, you know. So
you've done that. You're a veteran.
I have done that. I like to think about that. But I feel like I still have a few in me, and you know, especially when I get more time myself, I feel like I'll sit down and churn out a few more. But I have like a shorter one in mind, like I was just saying, this Jennifer Connelly, Jake Gyllenhaal, Labyrinth, because he's also in Prisoners, which is kind of a maze movie. So I feel like you could really like, you know, 5-minute sync video, like just really make a cool one. Anyway, you know.
Immediately, obviously, Alex and I are going to The Shining in our heads as you say that.
Yes,
you know?
the maze.
And I remember I was just talking about this actually with my housemate Bill. You might remember from Always Record. He interviewed you years ago. But what was it? Wait, what were we just talking about? Oh my god.
Jennifer Connelly, the mazes.
Being a parent.
Yeah, well, there's things like, you know, that Stanley Kubrick's first production company was called Minotaur. And so it's very interesting because when you look at The Shining, it's very much like that. And then also you have a space odyssey. So you have that kind of Greek mythological connection there. And then it's that he's battling the Cyclops, you know, David Bowman.
Interesting.
But yeah, no, I was going to say something. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, no, it's just there's you know, you through the years, you've gone through some transformations, I think, in terms of your style. And something that I've really resonated a lot with is that Kubrick quote, where he talks about the when you I don't know where Andreas went, but you know, if you really want to communicate something, the least enjoyable and least effective way is directly, because it only goes about half an inch. But if you can get people to the point where you have to think what it is that you're getting at and discover it for themselves, then the thrill of discovery cuts right through to the heart. And so like that plain picture phenomenon where you're communicating so much, but you're not even having to put yourself in it. And that to me is really like inspiring. I mean, I do something kind of similar to you, but I've been kind of at times drawn to do the narration, but then at the same time, I'm like, I just love it when people go, aha, but you can't really like, I don't know, because it's that whole thing of like, do we want to just give people a new piece of knowledge to add to their stack? You know what I mean? Like, because everything is already like that. And like, that's kind of the art of sync, is like to be able to, can you show it without the language on top of it? Can it have its own language? And like, I feel like data collection should be like that in the first place. And like, that's kind of what was her name? Dr. Judy Wood, the woman who did Where Did the Towers Go? That's kind of what she was arguing about 9/11. And she was like, you know, there's all these syntax errors because people jump at the explanations, and then they're trying to, you know, back up those explanations. Like they only have such a field to work with. And she's like, you should just let the data pile up to the point that it begins to speak for itself. So you can just see what's in front of you. But if you're jumping ahead, if you got to jump to conclusions, Matt, and you're like leaping ahead and then trying to be like, oh, you know, and having to defend your position or whatever. I never wanted to participate that doing podcasting. I'm not enthusiastic about that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I really don't feel like, you know, I feel like a lot of that stuff is for people's minds. And I feel like the sync isn't really for your mind. It's in a way to get rid of your mind. You know, you're trying to get into a zone where that part of you that is very real comes out, so that you get a bit of like, I guess you're like the aha feeling. And then there's something in that aha feeling that's beyond words, but through the art and through the recognition of that higher self that's awakening in you as you're experiencing something that is creative to the point where it unlocks that aha. There's a communication in there that's happening that's bigger and better than anything that I could say with words or that I could describe, and that you'll get, and that I get when I see something that's sort of transcendent, you know, and I'm like, wow, because that to me is real art. Real art is saying something that's beyond mind, but it feels really good, and it gives you that nourishing feeling of something beyond describing.
There is something to that, because the idea of like vampirism, where you feel exhausted by a thing versus something that you feel energized from, I think is huge, and like it's a good thing to look for. Do you feel like when you make sync, though? I mean, I've heard Dave talk about this, but what do you think about like boons from like these clockwork elves, right, or whatever? Like, do you feel like when you do a synchronicity work, or you help reveal synchronicity, that more synchronicity works in your favor, or anything like that? Do you think like it's a good thing to mitzvah? What do you think about that?
Sorry, you're saying,
like, if I put a sync film out with the way you did, like I feel like even just practically speaking, it helps the world. You know what I mean? Because like a lot of people are inspired by that. It gives them like positive energy, and also they're thinking about how things are connected in all sorts of ways, and they're making their own connections from that. Do you feel like even beyond that though, like the things that you're seeing, like that you think about like God, like, or this positive angel energy thing, do you think that if you do syncs that they help you with syncs?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it just, meditating on synchronicity, I feel like just constantly reminds me, and I feel like it is the message of sync is that sync exists, but I feel like it's not profound enough for people, so they just keep wanting to look for something deeper than that. But if you go, yes, synchronicity exists, then it changes the world.
Right.
Changes the world.
But you know, it's an attention span issue that exists. And I think if we were doing what we're doing, like before the internet age, it was like people would be relating to it differently. It's like everything got kind of narrowed down for a lot of people, and they just like everything is scrolling, you know, I'm going to this thing, next thing, whatever. And a lot of times when I've tried to show your videos to people over the years, people will say, they'll be talking, they'll be voicing their reactions to what it is that they're watching, and I'll be sitting there and being familiar with what it is that you produce pretty through and through, and I'll watch them talk over or look away right at the moment where the thing that they're asking is like ironically being communicated like right there. And I'm like, do I just rewind it and be like, no, really, just watch this again,
Just
like
do
you
it
missed
one more
the
time.
part.
Just watch
And
it
it's
for
like,
50 hours while we put eye drops in
lot-
your eyes.
a lot of times you'll have something that actually, like, you'll be going through the sync film, you could be 30 minutes 40 minutes into the film, and something that happens briefly will tie back to something from the beginning in a profound way. And so it's like that level of attention, like what you're doing, Jake, is implicit in what you're doing is assuming the best of the like awareness of your viewership, and which I think is complementary to your audience. So like, you know, there's sometimes like with the sync miss thing where it's just more fun, like it's like a fun ride, and there's, you know, the super duper looper and the way that the thing connects along, you know, and you're like, oh, looper with Bruce Willis and how, you know, all this kind of stuff. But then you have places where you're like, dude, you actually like it never it's right there and it's direct, but it was never spelled out. And so like it really, like, not everybody's going to be attuned to that, and not everybody's going to catch it to pay that much attention, so that they've watched this thing through and through, and they see how this one part relates back to something that you had said at the beginning of the communication. You know?
And what I love is wondering at what points the audience is going to go, he did that on purpose.
Yeah.
You know, he put that connection in that movie, and he knew because, you know, 20 minutes later it comes up again. And at what point did he not know? You know, and then that just happened.
Because there's a problem. Like a lot of the audience goes the other way. They're like, oh, this must have been natural. This must have accidentally. Intentional is harder to get to for people. They're like, this must have been not even a line, because it was so real the way they said it, that it must have just been natural. They ad-libbed it, you know, or something. Like that's a natural for a lot of audience. They're like, oh, this is so good, it must be real. Not that it's like so well done, it must be intentional. Right.
Well, look at the Attic Expeditions. Is that what it was called? The one with Andras Jones and Seth Green, where Seth Green says, or Andras says magic, and he goes, "Oh, you mean magic with a K?" And it's all like it's done in this kind of mysterious way. But if you know the backstory, you know that Andras was like, "This is what we should say," and then they threw it in there, and it's like he has his associations with it. But people could look at that and they're just like, "Oh, so these guys are all in the OTO." And it's like nobody here is actually in the OTO, as far as I know. So it's
yeah. I think syllogisms are the other thing. You go back thousands of years and people have been arguing about synchromysticism, but they've been saying these are not logical inferences. And so we have to ignore these illogical inferences. And then because they're not really practical, if you don't have a lot of data, like if you can't write things down, you're trying to like keep that's
a very Spock-like thing to say, you know. You got to have a Kirk there to balance it out. So.
Well, if you have a system that can hold all of that information, like reading and writing, you know, then you would eventually get to a point where you can assert synchromysticism from that data. But for a long time, it seemed probably less of a priority. And so more important to focus on, illogic logic, syllogisms versus synchromysticism.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say that I couldn't remember earlier. It's that when I was talking to Bill today about that time where I remember, this is years ago, it was just like on Facebook, you were like, I'm going to watch The Shining. Like you'd never seen The Shining before. Oh, you should take the camera off me because I want to see Jake's face when I talk to him. That would be
All right, Jake, we're looking at
networks too. But no, that you said you'd never seen The Shining, and I can't remember another instance in my life where I was like genuinely excited that somebody was going to watch a movie because I'm interested in what they're going to say about it, like. But I was like, ooh, Jake hasn't even seen The Shining, and he's like the ultimate sinkhead. What's going to happen? It was like, is something explosive going to happen? You're like, it was all right, but. Since that time, you've incorporated it in things. It's like, give me the bat, Wendy, and then you're like, here's Batman with Jack Nicholson. Like, come on, bring me the bat.
I just want to point out, I'm not Andreas Jones. I'm not that guy. Andreas Jones is not Andreas Nicholas. Yeah,
no, totally different person. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think that's also something about movie critics is that the more interesting a critic, the more like you don't even need to watch the movie. It's a completely different thing, when you read a critic that's like talking about what they're interested in. And so you can make something where it doesn't even matter if I've seen The Shining because if I have, it still doesn't matter because your interpretation of it is going to be your own, right? And so the more that we see different interpretations, the more that the space between the stars are mapped, right? I think that's what's good.
Yeah.
So Jake, you'd never seen The Shining until when? Let's back up here.
That had to have been like 2013 or something.
Okay.
That's funny because I don't remember that interaction with David.
You didn't. It wasn't an interaction with me. You had shared it on Facebook. I believe it was Facebook, where you're like, "I'm going to watch The Shining for the first time."
You just
a long time ago.
That is, my memory. I feel like I've seen The Shining when I was a kid.
Yeah, so, well, maybe you didn't remember it or something. But I remember you saying that you were going to watch The Shining, and I remember being excited that Jake is going to watch The Shining and talk about it.
Maybe it wasn't the first time.
I don't remember that. I remember it differently. I remember watching The Shining when I was a kid and, a teenager,
Okay.
I feel like, that's a pretty familiar film to me.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
I don't know.
Am I tripping and I'm talking about freaking Christopher Knowles or something?
It's
that
possible.
Could be. It's been a long time.
I'm constantly like, I forget like all the characters that have been involved in Sync and all the threads and, some of the stuff you've been talking about. Like even when you talk about Sync videos, I'm like, oh, Magic of a K. I haven't thought about that in like forever.
It's a long time ago. Yeah, well,
So
I got into this like I've always been interested in synchronicity. The first synchronicity I ever had was in 1989 when it was during the World Series, and then it was Battle of the Bay. It was the Oakland A's versus the San Francisco Giants. I was 8 years old, and there was an earthquake while the game was happening, and the Bay Bridge broke in the middle. And I remember saying to the adults around me, like, "Does anyone else see this? Like, isn't that weird? Like the Bay Bridge broke and it's Battle of the Bay." And it was like, they're like, "No, well, I don't see the big deal really." And I was like, that's bizarre. And like the rest of my life, I've always been like catching things like that, But then it was really the sinkhole, live from the Logosphere, a few shots to Shaman, like there, and and then this was before the Sync book, and also Mark Leclerc was really huge for me, And like you guys, like all like the line of that you were exploring was so inspiring and resonant. Like it just spoke to me, and I knew that I wasn't alone with that too. And even though it's like blogs or whatever, I'm like, people are like have to be being impacted by this. I mean, for me at that time, it was like kind of everything, because I was seeing what I was seeing there applied in the world around me, and it was kind of like just relating to things, and it's like kind of shifting my perception to a place where I wasn't relating to things as topically and approaching the mundane with recognizing depth within it is like really a fulfilling thing. And that's why I think you can make the argument that that you're dealing with something that's non-demonic when it you can feel it, like it's a resonant thing. Like I think that's the etymology of empathy. Like the real etymology of empathy has to do with art. It's a term that came from the art world, where when you look at a piece of art, something is transmitted, you perceive something, you know, like that was, you know, intentional or not from the artist, but like something came through, you know, you had an insight or whatever. So, you know, this does that for me. So I appreciate it.
Here says, literally watching The Shining for the first time, started a few days ago. I have about 30 minutes left of the film. It's crazy good. He's giving me hot tips for here, anything that they should be looking for, you know.
Got 30 minutes left.
Don't
watch it while you're watching the podcast.
I have to go.
Yeah, it's pretty late, and we got like a further an hour. But you know what? Thank you for joining us from Canada, man. And like, we'll make sure that people watch those Sync films. We'll put some links in there. I appreciate it.
And watch SYNCTANK as well.
SYNCTANK.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I just want to say before you go, the Red Door is pretty good. I like the Red Door.
Yeah. I mean, that I feel like is a deep cut that I feel like not many people have seen.
Yeah. Well, Jake, can we have you on again sometime? It's just such a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Totally. Yeah. And we'll do this again.
We'll see you soon, man. Take care.
Yeah, thank you for it's nice to talk about some of this stuff with people who are familiar with it and have some interesting feedback.
Despite what people might think for the first time, which is also pretty funny. You'd think we'd have like this way better orchestrated if we're running a cabal, but no. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Bye, Jake.
Jake is based Jake. That was fun. I like Jake a lot.
Oh, he's great.
I just think it's funny though, like that isn't the goal that we should like work ourselves into the work, you know, the like you're like eventually that's kind of the point is that you're more and more integrated into the sync because you're syncing so hard with the syncs that you have to.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you know, he just keeps putting this stuff out. He just puts it out there. It's not up to him what people do with it, where it goes, how it goes. It's just like putting out what he's interested in. And you know, that's where it's at. That's like real artist stuff, you know, where you could just, you know, it's out of my hands now, you know.
Yeah.
See where that goes.
Chill dad vibes in Canada. Alex, do you want to share some stuff that you've been syncing? I'll pull up your channel.
Oh,
Crypto.
Well, sure. I was to think whatever.
Substack up. Do you want me to do that, or do you want to do Twitter?
The Twitter's fine. The Julian Assange news yesterday was kind of huge because I was actually looking at yesterday as being a day of interest of something. Yeah, something would happen, and that happened.
Really? Why did you think yesterday? Why did you think yesterday was going to be a day of interest?
Well, for one thing, it was actually Lauren Coleman has a post about it. June 24th being a day of death for ufologists. Really? Oh yeah, and then this guy. So the Crazy Town singer dies 42 weeks after the Smash Mouth singer.
I just shared a meme yesterday, or the day, like 2 days ago, right before I saw this. It was like 2 days ago, and it was the girl that's coming in the porn meme, and it's come, and then the guy with the little fedora that says "Milady," and then like butterfly, and then a sugar cube, and a picture of a baby. And I was like, it's the first time I thought about the Crazy Town in such a long time. I had a MIDI file ringtone. Man, don't say that. I mean,
but it's the butterfly effect, man.
That's the butterfly effect. Oh, Alex, this is why I love you. Yeah. The Crazy Town butterfly.
That is what it thinks about. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. 42 weeks. I just think that's pretty amazing. I mean, two icons of like late millennial horrible music
that I love.
Died 42 weeks apart.
Bands. Sure.
Probably vaxxed. I don't know. Dang.
Yeah, it could be. Did he not? Was it suicide or did he?
I don't know. I couldn't really. I don't know. Didn't look into it that much.
Yeah, let's see here. See, that's exactly right, guys. Like the synchronicists, we barely know. Let's find out.
So but June 24th was also it was a 2-year anniversary of the day. Well, a lot of things happened, but it was on June 24th, 2022 that they overturned Roe v. Wade. But that was also the day that Q returned for the first time after like a couple of years gone. So it was a big deal. And, but then it was also, if you go deep in the files, you find that the 17th
pancreatic cancer.
The 17th U.S. intelligence agency was founded on June 24th, 2022. So it was. So I was just looking at June 24th. I was like, oh, that's probably something, and it's a Monday. So then this happened. So that's kind of cool. And yeah, the midpoint. What is that? The midpoint between the birth of Assange and his. What is it? Go back. I can't.
Where do we go up here? Midpoint.
Yeah, that second Civil War thing. The midpoint of the birth of Assange and the final Q post, which is the release of this movie, the Second Civil War, which is a Joe Dante directed movie, who directed Gremlins and
it has Beau Bridges, which is all Beau Bridges is tied to Trump.
Is he? I didn't know who that is.
Yeah, there's a whole thing. First, Beau Bridges played the landlord, which is my favorite Trump movie, which is like a movie about like Beau Bridges as this rich New Yorker who buys an apartment building in New York City. You got to watch The Landlord.
Okay,
the ultimate Trump movie.
I remember this movie.
Holy shit!
But Beau Bridges Trump conspiracy.
And that relates to what we were talking about Bridges and the
there's a baseless conspiracy that Beau Bridges is Trump, which I loved. I didn't believe it or anything, but I just like
shit.
Yeah, there was a whole thing with people that were like, Beau Bridges is. Where did I find that? Beau Bridges is Trump.
Oh, he's related to Lloyd Bridges. So he's the father of Lloyd Bridges?
I don't know. And Jeff Bridges. There's a lot going on with the Bridges.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Jeff Bridges' brother. Yeah, the Fabulous Baker Boys. Dog, come on.
Yeah, but there's like there were some actual ties, so ideologically at least. But there's some syncs, is the point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you guys, you've probably seen Jake's more recent videos on Trump with the Mario Brothers and all the Stormy Daniels stuff, where he's like a storm is coming and then it's stormy. He's got recent, just if you go on to Jake's Vimeo account and you look at his more recent videos, he's got really good 11.9 videos, because you got 9/11 and then you got 11.9, just like Michael Moore had Fahrenheit 9/11 and then Fahrenheit 11.9. But yeah, they're towards the top if you go there.
But yeah, so Beau Bridges has 220 credits on the IMDb. That's a lot.
Yeah. So he's. Oh, of course. Yeah.
I'm looking up. I'm trying to find.
There's a whole thing with Sega's mushroom tip, also, right? Wasn't there like a whole episode with that? I feel like
this is an incredible video. I mean, I maybe don't copyright stuff. I don't know about YouTube, but yeah, he goes through it pretty well. This is. I don't know. I think it's interesting. Like you can find all this continuing thread. Like there's like a formula that just like continues and continues on and on, but it reaches a crescendo with this kind of stuff where you're like, dude, she's. I don't know. I wouldn't do it justice.
Do you think that we sufficiently addressed the claims raised by Calcified Lies?
I don't even know what his claims completely are because it's a little vague. So I think it's just one of those things where he's seen connections and then he's saying that this is organized in such a way, which is fascinating because that's the thing that we struggle with. So
yeah, I'm starting to wonder if we're overanalyzed it and missed like it was a joke. Like maybe he's like doing the thing we do about us, you know what I mean? So he's like synchronistic.
Either way.
Like, he's like, look at this loose connection between these people, which is like literally what we do. So it's like, isn't that? It just seems weird. I don't know, but good.
Oh, I love it.
His point seemed to be that synchromysticism was deployed to distract people from the real conspiracies behind 9/11, or the stuff that, or
the real
that it's the synchronicity that Robert Zemeckis implanted information about 9/11, knew about 9/11 in advance, and so that was his thing. But that's just.
But what's the real
dead end of the maze? The maze runs around, comes back, and
what's the real conspiracy? Like, what's he saying 9/11 is really about? Like, is it just like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory? What's his actual?
I don't know.
Because like David does a whole thing with the Zohar. I feel like we're trying pretty hard. I don't know.
I know. That's one of the things I wanted to bring up with Jake was that the pendulum. There's a pendulum that goes one side of synchronicity to conspiracy, where for one period of time, everybody thinks everything's a conspiracy. Everything's a
Steam
conspiracy.
is
And
like,
then
are
it
you
sort of
funded
goes back,
by?
and then
are you
everybody
funded-
thinks, oh, it's all just an amorphous mess of fun, and then it swings back to the. So
if you
we're
or a
kind of-
shadow organization is looking for a YouTube channel to fund, you can email me. But like as of yet, like we haven't really quite secured our deal.
I'm the
Well,
opposite of funded by a shadow organization.
Well,
Yeah.
you have that thing where what is synchronicity? We're not just here talking about coincidences. We're talking about coincidences with meaning. And so, like I noticed a coincidence in zombie films where Mountain Dew keeps showing up. That's very, even though that's not Jake's, that's something like Jake would notice. He's like, why is Mountain Dew in all these zombie movies? Like I could see him seeing something like that. And then for me, I'm like, wait, Mountain Dew in Hebrew is tall, and it's a very significant word. Like it's part of this whole larger mathematical equation. And there's lots of meaning that you can extrapolate that, particularly in relationship to zombies, because it appears in the book of Isaiah specifically as the thing that awakens the dead from their graves.
Oh,
So there's like a strange prophetic verse about the dead coming to life, and it's the dew, it's the tall that does it. And then you're like,
the directed energy weapon,
yeah, but it's like, why is it in so many zombie movies? It's like if you watch World War Z, he's got that Coke machine, and then it's just like Mountain Dew pouring out of the Coke machine. And
there's
it's
a whole synchronistic language of soda, of soft drinks like Coke and Pepsi and Mountain Dew and Dr. Pepper. It's like if you study those, it's like this whole war. Joan Crawford and Michael Jackson are Pepsi aligned. And then you got like Mad Men and Don Draper with Coca-Cola.
Yeah, Pepsi is like transhumanism, Terminator, all that stuff. Coca-Cola is like fascism, patriotism.
Well, if you look at Alan Abedeth's
New Age
on it,
fascism,
he sees it as that the like Pepsi and Coke are the two political parties. So you have, that Coke is the red, it's the Republican, and Pepsi is the Democrat.
Operation being carried out on different levels of society.
Yeah, I mean, they actually admitted it. Obama admitted it with his original advertising campaign, taking that it was like, oh, well, Pepsi must have taken it from us then because they changed their logo after we did what we did. And he's like, but then he's also acknowledging that, yeah, we took it from Pepsi. So it's like, so Pepsi's imitating them. So he's like, well, then what are they going to do about that then? If Pepsi then changes it because we did what we did, which took from there, like, it's like, where are you going to go with that?
I remember Mark Leclerc on one of his interviews had a thing about the sort of ritual significance of soft drinks and the fact that like you drink a Coke, you're supposed to belch. The belching is the point, and it's like this sort of invocation of Satan or something like. And that's what it is.
Trying to convey in Meatballs with the belching contest.
Yep, that's what it is.
There we go. Bill Murray. Yeah, he's behind it. Bill
Murray's a Satanist. Total Satanist.
Total Satanist. Allegedly.
Top of the food chain.
We're live. Allegedly. Let's be clear about that. I am not calling Bill Murray a Satanist, except without that allegedly.
Just kidding.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure he's really nice. And why is my face like this right now? It's so uncomfortable.
What do you mean?
Oh, it's just on this. However, Andreas has this arranged here. It's always distracting to watch myself.
Oh, to see yourself up close? Well, just look at me. Yeah. That's what I do. I look at you.
Belching is satanic. Yeah.
Or I look at the comments.
That's good. Like, yeah, fizzy liquor. The drink. You imbibe it, and then they do that in Mad Men. Like, you remember the scene in Mad Men where Glenn, who is Kubrick, who is also the son of the showrunner, Glenn, the character, is meeting up with Betty, Don Draper's wife.
Yeah,
and she's got this. She's drinking a glass Coke with the straw in it, and it's extremely like obviously placed between her legs, and he's sitting there next to this whole thing. I can't. You'd have to show it. It doesn't do it justice. But do you remember that scene at all? Or that whole arc? Do you remember the arc of Glenn in Mad Men?
I can tell you, yes, I do. And yes, throughout, like, I was really reluctant to get into Mad Men because, like, my girlfriend at the time insisted we kept watching it, and I wasn't actually that into it. I was like, dude, all this guy does is he just like drinks and he cheats on his wife, and it's just like, and it's fucking like this Bernaysian shit, and I'm just like, why do I care about these people? And then it was like somewhere around like halfway through season 2, I was just hooked because I started picking up on what the show actually was. I didn't realize it at first. It's why it ends with the sun card with every episode from Taro, you know, because you're what you're doing is you're looking at a show
He's got the
about
coke.
About people being manipulative
Talking about that.
in advertising, but then the show itself is doing the same thing again in itself. Like it's using the same methods that they're speaking to in the advertising in the show. Like it's literally they're doing the same thing. And so like it's like those levels to it just started to trip me out. And also like that you know, you have that whole thing where he's Dick, right? And why is he Dick? He's Dick because his freaking you know, because there's the two characters. There's Don Draper, but his real name is Dick. And it had to do with when the baby was brought to the doorstep, or while she was giving birth to him, she said, "I'm going to boil his dick in pig fat. I'm going to boil your dick in pig fat." Talking about the father of Don Draper, and then they named the kid Dick. And it was like, dude, so his whole life then becomes like a burning away of the fat. And that's why like the way it ends with Esselin, and he's just like the work that he's doing, and you're like, oh, this was all like a purging thing that had to do with his beginnings, like where he came from. And then even like the whole flipping him with the other guy, it's like he still has his secret identity that's there in the midst, you know. And it's really an interesting show. But yeah, I did pick up on the subliminal stuff like that they use stuff that they used in advertising in the show. So and then the way that they're being influenced by media, and they're showing the way that ended up like influencing the advertising. So they all go to see Rosemary's Baby one episode, and then what is the advertisement they're going to do? It's about a conspiracy where everyone's all in it together, and then they recreate that scene in Rosemary's Baby. That kind of stuff totally goes on. So you're like, wait a minute, who's at the head of this? Is anybody at the head? Like, because they're playing on other media in the advertising that they're being influenced by while they're trying to influence other people. And then, but what do we do when the influencers are influenced?
Yeah, I have no doubt that Obama influenced PepsiCo, or whatever the advertisement team was for them was the same team. Like, right?
Right.
Like, wouldn't it be great if there was a soda that came out with your presidency? Wouldn't it be great if that soda was Pepsi? You know what I mean? Like, that's like, why not? Right.
Right. And then you're like,
what was I going to say about Mad Men? Glenn, the character. There's one character in there named Glenn who is kind of in sporadically throughout the show, played by the show creator's son. The show creator's name is Matthew Weiner.
Yes.
His son's name is Martin Holden Weiner. And he cast his son as his character Glenn, who falls in love with Don Draper's wife, who as a boy falls in love with Don Draper's wife, who is a grown woman, obviously. And he grows up through the series, and there's this whole thing where she's kind of in love with him too, but he's a little kid, and it's really awkward. And everybody in the fan base was like, what the fuck is this series? What is this story about? But they don't understand that he's Kubrick, because he looks exactly like Kubrick, first of all. And this was brought up, I think, by Andreas on Always Record the first time. You go back to listen to one of those. He says, doesn't he look a lot like Kubrick? And he does. And the whole thing is based around that fact. And it's weird as shit. And
right, totally. So, yeah, there's the episode, The Monolith, that's the name of the episode. That's the episode where he looks down the elevator shaft and almost walks into an empty elevator shaft. And you'll notice the beginning of every episode is him falling, and they have this whole falling theme. I think it's a Babel reference. I think they're relating to that this whole thing that we're building is like it's almost collapsing in the midst.
Sure.
You know, like even as it appears to be rising, it's just doing this perpetual like rising and falling kind of thing.
Here's how you know he's doing it. He's doing it purposely, and it's about Kubrick because the character does whatever he does, but then he has a very conspicuous role in episode 2 of season 4. So it's 4-2, season 4, episode 2. And it's that episode is called Christmas Comes But Once a Year. And it's all about Christmas. It starts with them going to buy a Christmas tree. And then they go home at some point, and Sally gets a call on the phone, and it's Glenn. But Glenn talks to her, and he says, or in order to talk to her or something, he says, "My name's Stanley." He calls himself Stanley. It's Stanley. Do you know why? I'm calling it that? Because it's private. It's a secret. And it's like he's fucking putting this encoding into the show. This is about Kubrick, telling everyone, and nobody seems
Right.
nobody
Well, they
got
picked
it.
an anchor point in time and they filmed the show in relationship to, so you're watching the kids grow older season by season, and we're literally going through the timeline of what was happening at that time in real time, basically from when they started it. It's like as the show was being produced, this is how it worked. And so that makes a lot of sense because there's that episode where they go to see Planet of the Apes. And then what was it with his kid? What was the deal there? I can't remember exactly what happened with the Planet of the Apes.
I wish I knew it better because
the point,
Glenn
but the point
features in
is
some
that
of the Love and Spoonful. There's like a scene where Don is driving Glenn home and they're listening to the Love and Spoonful, and it's just you get this uncanny sense. Like, what is he? Is this just a vanity thing? He's trying to put his no. It's like this subtext about Stanley Kubrick. Okay,
right.
The whole show is about Stanley Kubrick, and it's bizarre.
In a sense, you could make that argument for sure. I mean, there's certain places where that becomes more pronounced, but it's also a hodgepodge of references.
I mean, it's about a lot of things, obviously. But
yeah. I mean, Lana's music is more than just about David Bowie, but David Bowie is a big part of it. Sure. Sorry, Jason. No offense. But Jason's got a brilliant analysis.
Why don't you have Jason on here?
I would love to. Just invite him on. But we have a kind of a different scope on like that stuff because he's attributing David Bowie's work and Lana Del Rey's work to the Kabbalistic tree in terms of their album and the structure of everything on the Mask of God, and I resonate with that greatly. I'm just like, if we're going to entertain intentionality beyond what Jake was pointing at, just in terms of how they might be purposely doing that, like Jason believes, or at least what he projects there. I think that there's stronger arguments when you get into like Kenneth Grant stuff. Like, are these people really influenced by Kenneth Grant? Like, I mean, she's Lizzie Grant, but
right. Did Jason know that Lana Del Rey was born the same day Return to Oz came out?
Oh, you should tell him that. It'll probably blow his mind. Yeah, if he doesn't know already.
And that George Lucas produced Return to Oz. What about Chloe? What about these? Any more of these that you want to point out here? There's some pretty good ones.
I mean, any of them really. What was
You did one about Bitcoin. There's this one was kind of funny. 1517, 153. Oh my
153 God. Coming up in the Terrence McKenna. I was listening to that Terrence McKenna Time Wave talk the other day, which is funny.
Oh yeah, that's classic.
Further up here or down?
It was down
right here.
There, right there. I was just kind of making some comments on it, but the Time Wave really parallels with what I do in a lot of ways. I'm sure a lot of people do think this, but I feel like Terrence McKenna is a real kindred spirit of mine. We even have the same birthday. So
I think a lot of people do think that you are a kindred spirit with Terrence McKenna.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I try to make sure everybody knows.
I think that.
Alan's Hindsight 2020 has an episode that, or maybe a couple, that goes into the Time Wave Zero thing, and
really?
Where you've seen Hindsight 2020?
I actually haven't.
Oh man, you gotta watch that. Everyone needs to watch that. It's so understated. It's just like it's kind of a magnum opus. I mean, they're in different parts. I uploaded them to YouTube as all one thing. I like to put them all together.
Oh, nice.
Just put it up there.
I think it's on my channel still, right? Let me check. Yeah, it's still on my channel. If you look for Hindsight, you can find it on Xirtus.
I think it's like 3 hours long if you take all the episodes and put them together, something like that.
Well, what does he say about Time Wave exactly? Did he say?
Well, what he's doing is he's looking at the 2012 argument and bringing in Arguelles and like how it connects and I
guess that's what the hindsight is all about. So he's looking at 2012 from the hindsight of 2020. Is that what that was about?
Yeah, he's looking at everything that's hindsight from when he made the video, and a large part of it, that video, the whole series kind of centers around that one correspondence dinner with Trump, where Obama was making fun of a Trump White House, and then
it started Orange is the New Black.
Right. It started that you can see the whole future there in that moment with Trump listening to that and him just kind of sitting there and taking that on, because he was like making fun of him for like, even how ridiculous it would be to have a Trump White House. And at that time, what we know from Julian Assange was that they were likely still at that point relating to him as a future Pied Piper candidate that they would use, because even before the 2016 election, there's been lots of examples of them using that strategy. Most of the time it's worked for the Democrats to get the most extreme candidate to give a help substantiate, give a platform to, but then be like, no, you, like it was a gamble to be like, okay, well, we'll help run this guy because he'll be so extreme that it'll be, you know, in their view, they're so arrogant, it'll be impossible for us to lose. For me, that beyond Afghanistan, that was one of Julian Assange's biggest smoking guns, was that email from Podesta to the DNC outlining that strategy. But you can kind of see it even when Obama at that press correspondence dinner, the way that he's treating Trump, it's almost like they've already had this planned.
This is 2011. The 2011 White House Correspondents' Dinner.
That sounds true.
The one, yeah, okay. I'm just trying to look it up. I was trying to look for an actual date of when it happened. It was quite a
weekend. That was also they called the coronation of the king weekend or something like that. What did they do? They dig up the Pope and they take his blood and they do something with it. You know what I'm talking about? You'd have to watch Hindsight 2020. He does a pretty good job of. He's like in a scene straight out of Rosemary's Baby. Here's what the Catholic.
Well, Church I was tripping on just the fact that Time Wave Zero abbreviated. I did abbreviated it to TWZ, and I was like, well, that's the Wizard of Oz. That's the same thing.
Oh.
Time Wave, and so yeah. Time Wave.
I get it. Yeah, that's great.
And I guess Lorenzo or whatever, the Psychedelic Salon host, is like, everybody hates the Time Wave. Oh, it's so, we don't want to talk. Nobody wants to hear about the Time Wave. It's so, everybody's arguing, and it's sort of fascinating to listen to everybody argue with him about it. And but I still like the Time Wave and the idea of the novelty wave versus habit and everything that he did in that regard.
I believe in it. I actually believe in the Time Wave Zero thing, but the way I relate to it is that we reach a certain crescendo with the distribution of information. And so it almost speaks to the meme. What the phenomenon of the meme is that even like cross-culturally, that you can communicate at lightning flash speed through something as external as the internet. So it's not necessarily your mind, but we're replicating that in the world of form as like, I can communicate something to you and it can get through to your mind in like almost an instant. And so it's that peak of culture because it's such a massive variable in the way that things will play out. Because if we're just treating it without that level of communication occurring, it's almost like we're making neurological connections with each other across the planet. So like now I can communicate with somebody in Germany or Sweden or India or whatever, for the most part, maybe not North Korea, but most places in the world, I can articulate something to, and they can actually.
It's The Shining, and that's all. That is what is literally is The Shining. I think about is the communication and the evolution of communication. And
I couldn't agree more. That's like Danny sitting there with the television set that's not plugged in while he's watching Summer 42. There is no cord. So it's like wireless communications, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And like,
and now we have Starlink or whatever. We have Elon Musk who's they're putting all these, you know, I remember, I think it was 2023, August 25th, on the 237th day of the year, Elon called a press conference to announce that there were going to be no more dead zones on planet Earth. The whole planet's covered with wireless signal. Right. And so, to me, I think, well, that just made, if they had that in The Shining, there wouldn't be a movie. You know, she'd just be on her phone and they'd, you know, give Danny an iPad for 9 months and they'd be fine. But
oh, you're muted.
Point of interest. Like, what if they just had the town blocked off? You can communicate, but they can't get there, you know?
Sure. Well, there's different ways you could go about it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that was such a missed opportunity with Dr. Sleep that should have been. I'm not even a fan of most CGI, but if they did what they did at the end of Rogue One with Princess Leia with Carrie Fisher, if they would have done that with Scatman Crothers and like, you know, like an older Scatman, whatever they needed to do, like that I
That would
just
have
I
been
thought
Uncanny Valley for sure.
yeah, that would have been really a really good use of AI, and it would have been so appropriate from the perspective of Kubrick's relationship to AI.
True.
So it's like not even just the movie AI, but 2001
Well,
and how.
I honestly feel like that movie's kind of a demonic inversion of The Shining in a lot of ways. Like I didn't like it at all. I thought it was a pretty bad movie in general, but
Yeah.
didn't like the whatever vibe it was giving off. And I think I've explained on this show a number of times why. But
what I really seriously wonder is if, because Ewan McGregor playing Danny is older, if they didn't offer that to Danny Lloyd, if they didn't offer that to Danny Lloyd first, that was a huge freaking mistake.
Yeah,
because that could have been Danny Lloyd's only other movie, and how cool would that have been?
That would have been.
You know what I mean?
That would have been appropriate. I could see him turning it down.
Maybe,
but
maybe not. You know, it's just I'm just curious. We probably did. They probably reached out to him, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I wonder. Yeah. I mean, it's not Dr. Phil. You know what I mean? Like this isn't something like he doesn't have what Shelley Duvall has. It's going to be this humiliating thing. He could actually like be like, oh, if he was ever going to do another movie, that would be the one, right?
Yeah.
I would have
been movie stars.
If Danny Lloyd had played the part of Ewan McGregor in that movie, I would have been first in line on opening night.
Okay.
I would have been there. You know what I mean?
I would have been. Really I was there anyway. I was there regardless.
Were you?
Didn't. It felt like a Marvel movie, you know, like they took all the ghosts and the tropes and all of The Shining and just kind of spat it out into a Marvelized version of it and tried to make it scary, but
that was
turned into
the Haunting of Hill House and stuff, right?
Yeah, and everybody really highly praises them, but I'm not a big. I don't really get it.
Did you see the Haunting of Hill House or the Hill? That it has some other name, I think, but it's based on it.
No, I don't think I saw it.
So the Haunting of Hill House and House on Haunted Hill came out like I think either the same year or one right after the other. I think it was actually the same year.
You're talking about the 63 version?
The book. So the book, The Haunting of Hill House, came out the same year as the movie House on Haunted Hill, and supposedly not related. And so then you have different versions of that. So The Haunting, the movie The Haunting, which is one of the greatest horror movies ever made, and totally a pioneer in some of the special effects and stuff.
It came out 237 weeks before 2001.
Right. So that one's based off The Haunting of Hill House, but not House on Haunted Hill. So like that's kind of weird. And then but actually there is one major piece in The Haunting of Hill, that new show that's the same people who did Dr. Sleep, where there's something that ties together through every episode where somebody's basically seeing themselves like when they die, but they don't know that that's who they're interacting with. They're like, oh, the scary neck lady or whatever, and then it like comes together that it's like, oh shit, it was me all along. And I'm spoiling like crazy right now, but it's such a fucking cool twist that it like kind of like excused the whole, like not just excused, it substantiated the whole show. You know, it's just I need that. I need some kind of twist. And like the end of The Shining has one such twist where you're like, it was him the whole time. You know, he's always been the caretaker, but you're like, oh, to that level. Oh my God, it's a Vardo. Oh, he's fucking dead already the whole time. Jack Nicholson was dead the whole time. It's like the original Sixth Sense, you know, but not even everybody even catches that. It's in plain sight, but not everybody realizes it's an evil reincarnation cycle, quote unquote, from Kubrick, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I see it as very Tibetan, The Shining. Like I see it as like a Greek tragedy and like a Tibetan philosophy, like enshrouded in that Greek tragedy somehow. Like the two like kind of coexist for me, at least. You know,
I can see that. Yeah. Mark's whole analysis kind of focused it on as like you know, this is the Greek myth being put out. Recapitulate.
I agree with Mark 1,000%.
Saturn eating his children, and his struggling with his Apollo. Danny is Apollo.
Yeah. Which literally Nietzsche said in The Birth of Tragedy that Apollo means the shining one.
Right.
And so I've not found that elsewhere except for Nietzsche, but he makes that claim. And so for me, it doesn't even matter because it's like, well, if Nietzsche said it, then maybe that was taken from. I don't really know, like what, like, because that's not in the book. He's not wearing a fucking Apollo sweater in the book. I mean, is there a movie that's further removed from the book than The Shining? There probably is one, but I think it's up there. And like, wow, talk about creative license or whatever. You know, it's much different. But,
yeah, it's much different. I mean, I think that's seems to be the whole point of the overturned red beetle, isn't it? That
so they argue.
yeah. I mean,
You're basically looking at Stephen King right there.
It's an inversion of the book, really. Everything that goes on,
or doubled, yeah, or it's like a binary communication. There's that, and then there's the mirror. You know, it's got a mirror focus, you know, through the whole thing, and like that's.
What do you think's the point of doing an inversion, like of all the archetypes, and why are they doing?
Oh, I have a theory. I think that Kubrick films are literally Masonic tracing boards. So he's basically taken all the components of a Masonic tracing board and he's embedded them in the film itself with the 3-point perspective thing. Because like you know, it's just over and over and over again in like so many. The Shining, it's a bit more pronounced, but you can see it everywhere, and it to me it screams of a Masonic tracing board, and the Masonic tracing board itself is pointing to the two orders, the order of emanation and the natural order, and our replication of that order, which is where we get AI and all of that. So what we manufacture. And so yeah, it's really
Kubrick, Da Vinci levels of perspective. Somebody was talking about the Last Supper on Twitter, or whatever, just the games that Da Vinci was playing, and really that's the sort of influence I see the most in Kubrick's framing and stuff. Is that level of Renaissance painting, sure. Da Vinci levels of encoding the image, and I think he was on that level of thinking as well.
Somebody randomly said in the comments, I smoked Camels for 5 years, which is funny because that's literally what I'm talking about. Because if you look at a pack of Camel cigarettes, you're looking at Hebrew Gimel, because Gimel's where we get the English word camel. So you're looking at a pathway on the Kabbalistic tree. And then if you look at the corners of the pack of camels, it'll have the two pillars there. You know, so if you put in camel pack, maybe. Oh, you say Gimels. Yeah. Gimel is camel, but yeah.
Cools.
Gimels, yeah. Oh, is there something else you're trying to show us? Oh, Gimel, the letter. Yeah. So, and that corresponds to the high priestess. But the point is, I guess, is that you're looking at what is the equivalent of a Masonic tracing board on a pack of camels. You know, that is totally a nudge, not as good of a wink to a blind bat from Masons, or at least people affiliated with Masons who came up with that imagery, you know, or I'm convinced, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
They came up with everything. Scrolling with my face on this thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. How much of everything is you know, oh, I came up with this, versus stuff that, like we say, like, wow, you know, this happened to be done 666, etc. from another date. You know, like how sometimes the stuff just happens, right? And I want to take credit for it, right? Like. So yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's both.
Well, I've got here's an example of great synchronicity in my life. I left my place of residence that I grew up and moved to where I am now. And the address here, the number is 1112. So just keeping that in mind, the whole process of selling the house and moving across the country kind of kicked off after my mom died. So that journey from the span, literally, let's see, how does this work? Okay. Oh, too much pressure, and it's a personal memory.
You're living at an auto supply place now? You live at an auto supply place? This is outside your
No.
No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I'm joking.
Okay, yeah. So basically, we arrived here at my house 1112, exactly 1112 days after my mom died.
Oh wow!
So it was just like, definitely didn't plan any of that shit, and it was like completely scary. So I mean, that's what I study. That's the kind of phenomenon that I'm looking to understand. Really.
Yeah. Word.
architecture and why that kind of thing happens and continues to happen without any of us really knowing it. There's like, we have this whole puppeteer theory about it, which is like, comes from Being John Malkovich, which I kind of wanted to bring up with Jake. I didn't know if he was a big fan of that movie or not, but like the Being John Malkovich theory of life, which is that we're all being puppeteered by some kind of force that we don't really understand.
Right. I've always
or
I
just kind
ascribe
of
to the idea that they're mutually interdependent.
Yeah.
So like, you know, chaos and order or whatever. But you know, you see something like that and it's personal. It's a bit different sometimes applied than when you're looking at something just in media and you're making these connections. But really, where's the line? Like, it's kind of what Jake was saying about the, you know, or at least what I was pointing at as well, was this idea of like the observer and the observed being so connected, you know. But yeah, I mean, I would just see that as like an acknowledgement that there's intelligences beyond what we relate to as intelligence, you know, and that's just the nature of things. And you know, it's like Plato said that all knowledge was innate, you know, and so I see the accumulation of knowledge as really just dividing in order to expand, which is this relative thing. Like, it's really like, oh, is it expanding or is it dividing? And it seems like both are this two sides of the same thing. And then, you know, in the midst of that, there's something deeper, you know. And so
yeah,
I think that's it shining through into that. It's like the Leonard Cohen quote from the Kabbalist, where he's like, there's a crack in everything, is how the light gets in, you know.
Sure. My mind is, I'm just losing thoughts like sand in the hourglass.
Oh shit.
What was I gonna say?
Our lives. Yeah.
Forget it. I got a cat that's bothering me too. Sorry.
Oh yeah. Don't you have like a bunch of cats? What do you have, like 10 cats?
No, just one. I have one cat.
Oh,
one
I thought you had a bunch of cats. Why
No,
did I think you had a bunch of... Oh no, it's just because you used to share a lot of cat videos. I thought that they were yours.
Yeah, well, I lived with 3 cats for a while.
Okay.
So,
oh, is
anyway.
that what it was too? I don't know. I've known you for a while, so yeah. It's
yeah,
been years actually.
It all runs together.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Where's Andreas?
I don't know.
Is he eating?
He's
is
just
he even listening? He's just left us on autopilot and it's just like, oh yeah, they can
you guys can handle it. He takes all the donations and we generate the content.
Yeah. I'm going to go on from this to do a meta egg with Will and Zach about a particular sync film that
which one?
Bitter Honeymoon, which you've seen.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Bitter Moon with Lana Del Rey's Honeymoon.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
We've been on like a particular thread of similar symbolic set of sync films. So what do we start with? The White Album with Rosemary's Baby, and we went from that to discussing The Haunting of Julia, Full Circle. I think before that though, we did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and with Lana Del Rey's Norman fucking Rockwell, and so now it's Lana's Honeymoon with Bitter Moon. So that should be interesting.
Well, Bitter Moon, you know, came out, it figured into my Purple Rain series, right? Because it came out on the midpoint between Willy Wonka and Snowpiercer.
Yeah.
And along with Michael Jackson's Who Is It video.
My volume went out. Hold on a second. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Oh yeah, no, I'm back. It's just every so often my receiver just shuts down. But what was that midpoint of Willy Wonka?
The midpoint between Willy Wonka and Snowpiercer. You know, it's like the whole is the release of Bitter Moon with Emmanuel Signer. And then it's also Michael Jackson's Who Is It video, which is, you know, continues the Who theme, the W, Willy Wonka.
Oh my God, that's crazy, actually. Because the thing with so, you know, that house where Michael Jackson grew up has a giant monolith like in front of it with a picture of him moonwalking on the monolith. It's like it's in the same shape as the monolith from 2001, but then and it's black, but it has Michael Jackson on it. And then there's the crazy thing because he's the moonwalker, right?
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
you're like, Moonwatcher is the first ape in the book and the movie to touch the monolith. And the person in the suit of Moonwatcher was the director of photography for John Lennon's Imagine video.
Yeah.
And so there's all the symbolism wrapped up in that. But yeah, no, it's a trip. Yeah.
He was
So
a mime.
Yeah, so it's like the Moonwalker
Moonwalker.
connection. And then even it was related to something you were saying too, because it's bitter moon. It's like honeymoon, bitter moon, moonwalker, moonwatcher. That's pretty weird.
It's extremely weird. Oh yeah, that was the thing that I wanted to. My one tweet that I did want to show up. Maybe if Andreas is still listening, I don't know if he's abandoned us, but is that it's the one about 666. So the new inauguration, the next presidential inauguration, will be 666 months since the moon landing. Exactly. So that and to me, I'm thinking, so who does that augur well for? And I think maybe it kind of RFK in a way, because he's the well, it'll be, I don't know, he's the child of the Kennedys who inaugurated the Apollo moonshot. And
where do I go to find this tweet?
It's got to be right there near the top, or down. Just go one at a time, and it won't be long. It's next one. Nope. Again. Maybe further. Sorry.
What was the Hawktwa? What's the Hawktwa sync? Now I'm curious.
Hawktwa?
I'll have to go back.
We can,
because I love that Tony Hawk Twa is like if the French Canadian version of the sequel. I don't see.
Yeah, well, that ties into it too. I didn't even think. I forgot about Tony Hawk. There it is. The winner of this election will be sworn into office right there on the day exactly 666 months.
Oh, so, that's cool. So it'll be a fake election, or like it'll be like a election hoax or something like that. What's the sync there?
Well, I'm trying to decide who does that make.
If someone, all right,
who's going to be on the stage?
Someone was asking me like who I'm voting for. Whichever candidate comes out with like a moon like PSA where they're like walking in a moon suit, like that will probably help. If they do like a fake moon landing set for like a vote for me thing, I might be into it. I'm just saying.
Oh, interesting.
Just like a little nod. You don't have to say it completely, but if it was a little nod like that, I would probably be down.
I got Will in the comments saying DCP and asking something of me. And
I'm pretty sure that's not him. That's probably his daughter.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I don't know if it would say Will Morgan, though. She has her own weird name.
So she probably jumped on his keyboard. What's she asking?
Maybe. Yeah, that's a good point. It might be her. But
anyway, no. It is Will saying, "Let's go to Meta Egg." Yeah, he wants to Meta Egg.
All right. All right.
That's real. That is real. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I love you guys. We'll see you next time. So you guys go join Meta Egg right now. Go watch it.